The first time Daniel Carter saw her, he thought she was a shadow. A long, unmoving shape tucked beneath an old blue pickup, parked crookedly at the edge of a dirt pull-off near Interstate 90, where the wind cut sideways across the open field. Most strays bolted the moment a truck slowed. This one didn't. The closer Daniel looked, the stranger it was. She didn't flinch, didn't back away, didn't even raise her head fully. She simply shifted her weight just enough to cover a darker corner beneath her, as if protecting something the way a hand cups a candle flame. A low, barely there whimper answered the movement. Then another, soft, rhythmic, hidden, like something trying to exist quietly. Daniel stood beside his work truck, gloves still on, reflective vest streaked with dust. He'd pulled over for reasons he couldn't name. Maybe the cold bit a little harder today. Maybe the wind carried a sound he subconsciously recognized. Or maybe it was the way the dog's eyes didn't track him. Most strays stared you down, gauging threat or hope. This one didn't meet his gaze at all. She kept her focus on the gap beneath her chest. Daniel cleared his throat. Not loud enough to be threatening, but enough to signal he was there. Nothing. No growl, no warning bark. Just a steady, protective stillness. He crouched, keeping distance. The dog's ribs lifted and fell in shallow breaths. Her fur was matted near the back, streaked with dirt and something darker. One ear twitched at the sound of a passing semi, but her posture didn't change. She stayed fixed on whatever tiny sounds were buried under her. Daniel exhaled through his nose. He knew fear when he saw it. This wasn't fear. This was duty, a kind of quiet, stubborn endurance. He set down a plastic container of food near the tire. He didn't try to slide it closer, didn't call to her, didn't speak at all. Something told him words wouldn't matter. The next morning, passing the same stretch of road, he slowed again. Habit now, though he wouldn't say so out loud. The pickup was still there. So was she. Exactly as before. Same position, same guarded angle, same rigid stillness. Daniel stepped out and scanned the ground. The container he'd left lay on its side. Not dragged, not torn, just tipped over. The food was gone, but the dog had not moved more than a few inches from where he first saw her. Mud caked her paws. Frost clung to her fur. Another car roared past on the highway. She didn't startle. She didn't run. She didn't even look up. She only adjusted her body by the smallest margin, folding herself tighter around whatever she was hiding. Daniel felt the wind sting his face. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and whispered a sentence he didn't fully understand. "You're waiting for someone, aren't you?" The dog didn't react. The tiny whimpers beneath her did. Daniel swallowed hard. He set down another box of food. Then he walked back to his truck, pulled the door shut, and sat there longer than he meant to, watching. The wind shifted, rattling the old pickup's rusted bumper. She didn't move. She was still waiting. Daniel Carter told himself he had no business stopping there again. Men like him didn't go looking for trouble. Not at 50, not after spending half his life patching broken asphalt and clearing debris off Washington highways. You see things on the road, you let them pass. That was the rule. Don't get involved, don't pick up strays, don't volunteer for heartache. Yet the next morning, when he approached the same pull-off near Interstate 90, his eyes drifted toward the old blue pickup before he could stop them. Habit, he thought, though deep down he knew it wasn't. She was still there. Same position, same posture, same air of silent refusal. Daniel groaned under his breath. He pulled his work truck to the shoulder anyway. He stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. The air was colder today, thin enough that it stung. The kind of morning where a man's breath felt heavier, more visible. Daniel shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and stared across the dirt lot. The dog hadn't moved. He muttered, "That can't be good." Most strays roamed. Even the half-feral ones didn't anchor themselves to one lonely patch of earth. They wandered off eventually, searching for heat, scraps, a safer place to sleep. But this one, she stayed. Daniel shook his head. He hated when a situation didn't follow the usual script. He approached slowly, though he told himself he wasn't approaching. He was checking. That was different. He wasn't adopting. He wasn't rescuing. He was just making sure the mess wasn't bigger than it looked. She didn't look at him. She didn't even raise her ears this time. She simply angled her body, barely noticeable, shielding whatever was beneath her chest like a living barricade. Daniel exhaled through tight lips. Probably had puppies. Probably born too early, too cold. Probably wouldn't make it. He swallowed the thought down. Hard. He'd had enough loss for one lifetime. He didn't need another reminder of how fragile things could be. I already lost enough things in my life. The sentence pressed through his brain like ice water. He hadn't said it aloud in years, but it still lived in him. His wife, Marlene, gone too soon. His son moved out and barely called. Even his job, the one dependable thing left, was dangling by a thread thanks to budget cuts at the county office. He could feel that thread thinning every week. Contracts up next month. Might not renew you. He didn't need a stray dog complicating anything. Nature will take its course, he told himself, lifting his chin as if logic alone could push him back toward his truck. Things survive, or they don't. That's how the world works. Yet he didn't move. He found himself crouching instead, elbows resting on his knees, watching the rise and fall of the dog's breathing. It was too shallow, too slow. She was running out of energy, but she wasn't abandoning whatever she guarded. Why? He wondered. There was no loyalty on the highway. Nothing stayed. Everything either drifted or died or got swept away by someone else's decisions. So why was she still here? A semi roared past on the interstate, rattling the ground. The dog didn't lift her head. Her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beneath her. Daniel felt something unfamiliar tug in his chest. Not pity. He knew better than to call it that. More like a question he didn't want answered. He stood abruptly, brushing dirt from his palms. That's enough for today. He forced himself to walk back toward his truck, opened the door, hesitated, swore under his breath, grabbed another plastic container of food from his lunchbox, and set it beside the tire again. This didn't mean anything. He could still walk away. He started the engine, but as he drove off, his rearview mirror framed one last image. The dog, motionless beneath the pickup, guarding the invisible life she refused to abandon. And the next morning, when Daniel passed by again, he didn't even pretend he wasn't looking. She was still there. The rain started before sundown, but by midnight it had turned violent. Sheets of water hammered against Daniel's windshield as he crawled along the nearly empty stretch of Interstate 90. The radio crackled warnings about dropping temperatures and icy patches. He should have been home already. But when his headlights swept across the familiar pull-off, something twisted in his gut. He didn't mean to turn around. His hands did it before his brain caught up, guiding the steering wheel into a slow U-turn until the old blue pickup came back into view, barely visible through the storm. He muttered to himself, "You're just checking." That's it. The wind shoved against his truck door as he stepped out. Rain hit his face in cold, sharp needles. In minutes, his jacket was soaked. The beam of his flashlight shook slightly as he approached the pickup. She was still under there. But this time, her head lifted when she heard his boots sinking into wet gravel. Her ears pulled back. Her chest expanded, though the movement looked painful. A deep, warning rumble vibrated from her throat. Not loud, not aggressive, just a reminder. She wasn't going anywhere. "Easy, girl," Daniel murmured, raising his hand slightly, more to calm himself than her. "I'm not here to take anything from you." The dog's eyes flicked toward him, then back down to whatever she was guarding. Her body shook with the cold, but she stayed locked in position, blocking the wind with her frame. Daniel lowered himself into a crouch, slow enough to avoid spooking her. The mud soaked straight through his jeans, chilling his knees. He angled the flashlight downward, searching for the source of the tiny sounds he'd been hearing for days, but never dared confirm. The light found them. 5 tiny bodies pressed into, the dirt beneath her belly, barely bigger than his palm. Pink noses, closed eyes, new to the world by only a handful of days. Their fur was patchy, damp, clinging to chilled skin. One let out a thin cry, almost too faint to hear over the storm. Daniel's breath stilled. They were still alive, against logic, against weather, against everything. The mother reacted instantly. She shifted, curling her body tighter around the pups, shielding them from his light, from him, from the rain, from the world. Her growl deepened for one heartbeat. Then it broke into a trembling shiver. Daniel felt something inside him lurch. Not pity, not even fear. Something sharper, something that made his jaw tighten. She wasn't defending herself. She was defending them. "All right," he whispered, voice low and steady. "I see what you're doing." He didn't try to touch her, didn't reach for the pups. His mind raced through cold weather emergencies he'd witnessed over decades on the road. Hypothermia doesn't negotiate. Newborns don't get second chances. But he also knew a hard truth. If he moved too fast, she'd fight him, and the puppies would lose. So he chose the smallest possible step forward. He stood slowly, moving back toward his truck. The dog watched him through the sheet of rain, muscles taut but not lunging. Her eyes tracked him like a soldier assessing a threat she had no strength left to confront. Daniel pulled a folded tarp from the bed of his truck. Old, frayed at the corners, but thick enough to block the wind. He approached again, stopping several feet away, letting her see the tarp before he moved another inch. "Just a cover," he told her. "That's all." The growl didn't return this time. She only tightened her body again, bracing herself for whatever he might be. Daniel crouched and laid the tarp on the ground beside the pickup, angled so the wind wouldn't rip it away. He lifted one corner carefully and draped it against the side of the old truck, anchoring it with a piece of broken concrete he found near the ditch. Then he did one more thing. He nudged his own work truck closer, reversing slowly until the front bumper created a wall against the brunt of the storm, channeling the wind away from the exposed underside of the pickup, where she sheltered her pups. His engine idled, warm air humming through the chassis, radiating a thin pocket of heat across the ground. He stepped back. The dog didn't attack, but her eyes met his fully for the first time. Not desperate, not wild, not trusting either. Something else. A flicker of recognition, as if she understood on some instinctive level that he had made a choice. Not a rescue, not a promise, just a decision. A small one, but a decision for them. Daniel swallowed, wiped rain from his face and whispered, "Stay with them. I'll be back." He didn't expect her to understand, but she didn't growl again. And as he climbed into his truck, soaked, shivering and rattled, he caught one last glimpse of her through the rain-blurred glass. She had lifted her head, not to watch the storm, but to watch him leave. The storm passed, but the cold stayed. The kind of cold that didn't shout, didn't bite. It seeped. It drifted into places meant to stay warm. It lived in the joints, in the quiet hours, in the parts of a man he didn't speak about. Daniel Carter felt that cold every morning when he stepped out of his truck at the pull-off near Interstate 90. The sky hung low, washed in gray. The wind skimmed across the open field, flattening the weeds. The ground was a churned mixture of mud, tire tracks, and frozen puddles. And beneath the old blue pickup, she was still there, still in the same position, still refusing to leave. He walked toward her, boots sinking into the muck. He carried a jug of water in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. Canned food, a small towel, nothing dramatic, nothing heroic. Just the supplies of a man who, for reasons he didn't want to examine, kept coming back. Every day. The dog didn't greet him, didn't acknowledge him with a bark or even a lift of her ears. Her loyalty wasn't his to claim. Her eyes flicked toward him only when he set the water down. Then they returned, always, inevitably, to the small cluster of bodies curled under her. The pups nuzzled blindly, tiny muzzles pushing through her fur. Only when they settled, only when each of them found warmth, did she begin to eat. Daniel watched this pattern repeat itself again and again. She didn't touch food until every pup was fed or sleeping. He found himself whispering, "You really don't leave, do you?" The wind answered instead, a long, hollow sound sliding across the empty field. Documentary-like, the world around him cut him into two versions of himself, one anchored in the present mud, one walking through memories he had tried to bury. In his mind, he saw himself years earlier, standing in a hospital hallway the night his wife died. He remembered the buzz of fluorescent lights, the way nurses spoke softly but avoided meeting his eyes. He remembered how he walked out of the building without looking back, not because he didn't love her, because he didn't know what to do with a pain that had no shape. Another memory surfaced, his son packing the last of his things into a duffel bag. The argument wasn't loud, but the silence afterward was crushing. Daniel remembered standing in the doorway, watching the boy go, telling himself giving space was the right thing. But it wasn't space. It was distance. A familiar one. He had chosen to stay quiet, chosen to retreat, chosen to let things end rather than hold them together. The present snapped back with a soft whimper from beneath the pickup. The German shepherd mother tightened her body around the pups. Her fur, still damp at the edges, clung to her ribs. She could have run. She could have wandered off in search of easier shelter or a warmer place. But she didn't. She stayed, even as the wind cut across the dirt lot like a blade, even as the cold stiffened her joints, even as hunger made her legs tremble. She stayed, because someone needed her to. Daniel exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. The air smelled of wet earth and pine drifting from the distant tree line. Every part of it mirrored the hollow places he carried inside. He set another can of food beside her. This time, she looked at him a beat longer than usual. Her gaze not soft, not trusting, but aware. He crouched, his knees cracked. He watched as she nudged one pup closer to her chest before lowering her head protectively. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I walked away from a lot of things in my life." The mud sucked at his boots when he stood again, and the sky above him darkened early, clouds gathering in a heavy, bruised shape. Storm coming again, he thought. Nature didn't care about his revelations. But when he walked back toward his truck, he realized something unsettling. He wasn't doing this out of obligation, or pity, or guilt. He kept coming back because every time he left, something inside him carried the cold home with him. Returning didn't warm him. It didn't fix anything, but it stopped the cold from spreading. The dog mother curled tighter around her pups as he started the engine. The headlights lit the mud, the truck, and her silhouette framed beneath it. She stayed for them. He kept returning because she stayed. And tomorrow, despite everything in him that resisted change, he knew he would come back again. By the end of the week, the pull-off near Interstate 90 wasn't just another forgotten corner of the road. people had begun to notice. And when people noticed, they talked. Daniel heard it first at the gas station, 2 locals standing by the coffee machine, glancing toward his muddy boots. "Stray dogs are dangerous. Someone's going to get bit. Should have called animal control days ago." He ignored them, or tried to. But the words clung like burrs. At the hardware store he heard a different version. "They'll euthanize her anyway. County's too full. Strays don't last long. Better to let nature take care of it." He tightened his jaw and walked away before he said something he'd regret. But the worst part wasn't the gossip. It was that people didn't see what he saw. They didn't see the pups. They didn't see the way she kept her body between them and the wind. They didn't see the choice she made every freezing night. They only saw a stray. So when the White County Animal Control truck pulled into the dirt lot early one morning, Daniel felt a punch of dread in his stomach. A woman stepped out, shaking sleet off her jacket. Lisa Monroe, late 30s, efficient, direct, and carrying the calm confidence of someone who had done this job long enough to stop hoping for good outcomes. "Morning," she said, approaching Daniel with a clipboard. "We've had several calls." Daniel didn't answer. He looked toward the underside of the pickup. The dog mother had lifted her head the moment the engine approached. Her eyes were locked on Lisa, her muscles rigid. Lisa followed his glance and nodded. "We need to get her out," she said. "And the litter. Cold like this, they won't last." Her tone wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind, either. It was procedure. Just another winter case. "What happens after you take them?" Daniel asked quietly. Lisa didn't sugarcoat it. "Depends on capacity. Depends on the mother's behavior. Depends on space." Which meant no guarantees. Daniel felt the cold burrow deeper into him. "I've been checking on them," he admitted. She raised an eyebrow. "That's so. I bring food, water. That'll make her more defensive, you know. Attachment complicates things." Daniel stepped between Lisa and the pickup before he realized he was doing it. "Let me try first," he said. "She knows me." Lisa hesitated. Regulations told her to say no. Practicality told her a calm human face might make the capture easier. "Fine," she said. "But if she snaps, I intervene." He approached the dog mother slowly, palms open. It had become a ritual by now. He crouched. He murmured. He let her smell the air around him. Behind him, he heard Lisa open the metal crate in her truck. The sound was sharp, metallic, too close. The dog heard it too. Her growl started low, then tightened. Her body hunched protectively over the pups. Lisa stepped forward. Easy now. The dog's eyes darted toward the crate, toward Lisa, toward Daniel. Daniel reached out instinctively, not to grab her, but to steady the moment. It was the wrong move. Her head snapped up, not in an attack, not with fury, but with the desperate clarity of a mother whose options had run out. Her teeth brushed Daniel's hand. A single bite. Shallow. Quick. Enough to warn him. Enough to stop him. Not enough to hurt. Daniel froze. The sting on his skin wasn't pain. It was understanding. Lisa stepped forward instantly. "She bit you?" "No," Daniel snapped, more sharply than he meant to. "She didn't mean harm." Lisa's eyes hardened. "Intentions don't matter when a bite's reported." "You're not reporting anything," Daniel said quietly. Lisa exhaled, torn between protocol and compassion. She wasn't heartless. She knew fear. She knew mothers guarding litters. Still, she glanced at the crate. "Look, if we don't take them, the cold will." Daniel turned back to the dog. She was trembling, her fur slick with frost. But she didn't retreat, didn't cower. She kept herself between danger and her pups. Leaving would have been easier for her. Running would have been easy too. Disappearing into the field, abandoning the cold, saving herself. But she chose to stay. Chose the harder path. Chose them. Lisa watched the standstill and shook her head. You can't keep coming out here forever. This isn't sustainable. Daniel didn't answer at first. He looked down at the 5 tiny shapes pressed into their mother's belly. Each breath they took was a fragile argument against winter. Finally, he turned to Lisa. Give me some time, he said. Just a little. Don't take them today. Lisa studied him for a long moment. You're taking responsibility for them? She asked. For now, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. For now, they're mine to protect. Lisa lowered the crate door with a sigh. Fine, but not long. She drove off, leaving Daniel alone in the frozen stillness, the dog mother watching him through the shadows beneath the truck. And he watched her back, the words forming in his mind long before he said them aloud. Leaving would have been easier. The dog chose harder. The realization settled over him with the weight of truth. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something shift inside him too. The snow came early that year. Not a blizzard, not a storm, just a steady, quiet fall that softened the edges of the pull-off and turned the mud into a pale crust. Daniel brushed it off his jacket as he approached the truck, carrying 2 bags instead of 1 this time. The dog mother lifted her head when he arrived. Her breath rose in thin white streams. The pups wriggled beneath her, warmer now, stronger. Their sounds were louder, their movements more certain. Every day he learned something new about her, not because she showed him, because the world around her did. The first hint came when he noticed the faint imprint on her neck. A worn patch of fur shaped like a collar had once rested there. Not a cheap one. A thick, reinforced working band, something used for farm protection dogs or livestock guardians. The second hint came from a passing neighbor who slowed when he saw Daniel's truck. You're feeding that shepherd? Yeah. She from the old Jensen farm, he said, gesturing toward the distant hills. Place shut down months ago. Foreclosure. Folks moved out overnight, left equipment and everything. Heard they used protection dogs up there. Big ones, loyal ones. He drove off before Daniel could ask anything else. Later that afternoon, when Daniel stopped by the small county office to drop off paperwork for his contract renewal, he overheard 2 clerks talking in the hallway. Sad deal, that farm. I know. They had a pregnant shepherd out there, didn't they? Yeah. Saw her listed as abandoned livestock protection asset. They couldn't take her when the bank seized the property. No funds for relocation, no outrage, no shock, just bureaucracy, labels on a document, protection asset, abandoned. Daniel walked out before they noticed him. Piece by piece, the truth took shape. Not loud, not dramatic, not made for headlines. She had been a working dog, trained to guard livestock through nights and predators and seasons, trained to stay, trained to hold her ground. And when the farm collapsed, when the owners packed what they could and left what they couldn't, she was one of the things that didn't fit into their new life. She had been pregnant at the time. She had been left behind. And instead of searching for safety, she did the only thing she had been taught to do. The only thing no one could take from her. The only thing she still believed mattered. She stayed. Not because she was loyal to people who abandoned her. Not because she expected rescue. Not because she didn't know how to run. She stayed because 5 tiny lives had no one else. Daniel felt something inside him settle into place. Not anger, not grief. Something quieter, something that felt like a truth he should have recognized earlier. She wasn't guarding the pups out of instinct alone. She was guarding what little purpose she had left. When he returned to the lot that evening, the wind bit sharper than usual. The dog mother watched him approach, but she didn't growl. Her eyes tracked his movements with a wary intelligence, as though she sensed the shift in him. He unpacked the supplies slowly. Blankets, heated pads, more food. He set everything down and heard footsteps behind him. A county truck again. Not animal control this time. Community services. A man stepped out with a clipboard in hand. "We received a report," he said. "The abandoned shepherd near the interstate. We're assessing liability. State regulations require us to remove her for safety evaluation." Daniel felt the cold deepen in his chest. "She's not dangerous," he said. "Sir, that's not the process. If she's abandoned property from a foreclosed farm, she falls under county responsibility." "And what happens then?" Daniel asked, though he already knew. "Evaluation," the man repeated. "And placement if possible. If possible. Same words, same vague promise, same risk." Daniel stepped between the county worker and the dog. "You're not taking her. Not today. Sir, I need you to step aside." "No." It was the first time in years Daniel had said the word with weight behind it. "She's got newborns. They won't survive a relocation, and she won't survive being separated from them." "Sir, you want responsibility?" "Fine, I'm taking it, all of it. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need. But she stays here for now. Under my care. My supervision." The man hesitated. County workers weren't trained for standoffs, especially not with a man who looked like he'd already endured enough winters to outlast stubborn policy. "We'll need verification," he finally said. "Written commitment." "Then bring it," Daniel replied. "I'll sign it tomorrow." And after a long beat, the county truck pulled away. Daniel turned back toward the pickup. The dog mother was watching him. Not with trust, she wasn't ready for that, but with something new. Recognition. He crouched low so his voice wouldn't carry in the wind. "You were left behind," he murmured. "But you didn't leave them. Not once." The pups stirred, pressing into her warmth. Daniel rested his hand on the cold ground, inches from her paws, not touching, just present. "I get it now," he said. "You stayed because no one else would." The wind settled, the field quieted, and, for the first time since he found her, the dog mother lowered her head, not in fear, not in warning, but in a small gesture that felt almost like acceptance. She had been left behind, but she never abandoned her purpose. And Daniel realized he wasn't ready to abandon his either. The next few days unfolded without drama, without sirens, without the frantic urgency that usually follows a rescue. Instead, everything shifted in small, steady movements, quiet, almost fragile changes that felt more like the world gently correcting itself than any act of force. No one was arrested for abandoning her, no fines issued, no newspaper headlines condemning what had happened. Real justice rarely came that way in rural Washington. More often, it appeared in quieter hands. Lisa Monroe returned first. She pulled up in the county animal control truck, but this time she stepped out without the crate. No clipboard, no warnings. Just a soft exhale as she approached Daniel, who was kneeling beside the pickup, checking the heating pads he'd set the day before. She asked, "How's she doing?" Daniel didn't look up. Warmer, more alert. "Pups are gaining weight." Lisa crouched a few feet away, careful not to intrude. She studied the shepherd mother with eyes that were no longer shielded by protocol. "You know," she said slowly, "there's a foster network I work with. Off the books. Volunteers mostly. They take in dogs that wouldn't do well in shelters." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Thought you weren't supposed to do that." "I'm not," she admitted. "But sometimes the rule book isn't enough. Not for cases like hers." She paused, then added, "I'll put in a request, quietly. Someone will step up." Daniel didn't thank her. He didn't need to. The look he gave her was enough, and she accepted it with a small nod before heading back to her truck. 2 days later, another vehicle rolled into the lot. Not a county truck this time. An old Subaru, faded green, with bumper stickers from national parks scattered across the back. A woman in her 70s stepped out, wearing a heavy parka and a knit hat pulled low. She moved with the calm assurance of someone who had spent a lifetime around animals. Her name was Dr. Evelyn Brooks, a retired veterinarian whose reputation in Spokane stretched farther than she ever acknowledged. She greeted Daniel with a gentle, steady voice. "I heard you've been doing the hard part." Daniel shook her hand. "Just trying to keep them alive." Dr. Brooks knelt beside the pickup, with surprising ease for her age. She watched the shepherd mother for a long moment, taking in her posture, her breathing, her alert but exhausted eyes. "She's a good one," Evelyn murmured. "Not many stay this long under these conditions." Daniel nodded. "She hasn't left them once." Evelyn set down her vet bag. "I brought supplements, high-calorie formula for the pups, antibiotics just in case, and blankets. Real ones, not the emergency types." The dog mother tensed at first, but when Evelyn reached out a slow, open palm, the shepherd didn't growl. She didn't retreat. She only watched, steady and firm, as if evaluating the woman before giving permission. Evelyn smiled softly. "She knows we're here to help." Together, they eased the new blankets beneath the pups. Daniel lifted the edge of the tarp to allow Evelyn better access, and the dog mother adjusted herself. Not to block them, but to make space. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was acceptance. Evelyn stood again, brushing dirt from her gloves. "She's not ready to be moved," she said, "and honestly, separating them now would do more harm than good." Daniel felt a knot loosen in his chest. "So you're saying?" "I'm saying we do this her way." Evelyn replied. "She stays with her pups. You keep coming until they're strong enough. I'll stop by every couple of days to monitor. No shelters, no crates, no stress." She gave him a long, thoughtful look. "There's no rush to force a new life on her. Let her heal where she feels anchored." Daniel swallowed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank her. Dogs like this make the world steadier than we deserve." They worked together until the sun dipped low, turning the icy field into a muted wash of silver. When they finished, Evelyn packed her supplies, gave the shepherd one last approving nod, and drove away. As the quiet settled again, Daniel crouched near the truck, watching the dog mother breathe easier on the fresh blankets. The pups slept in a warm, satisfied cluster. For the first time since he found her, he felt the tightness in his chest ease. Not because the problem was solved, not because the future was certain, but because the right people had finally arrived at the right time. No one had punished the ones who left her behind. No laws had been rewritten. No grand justice had swept down from above. But something small and important, had finally aligned. The dog mother shifted, curling more comfortably around her pups. Her eyes met Daniel's through the dim light. Calm, guarded, resolute. He whispered the truth that had been building inside him all day. No one was punished, but something was finally right. Spring arrived quietly that year, not with sudden warmth or bright blooms, but with a slow softening of the land. Snow retreated first from the open fields, then from the ditches, then from the lonely pull-off where everything had begun. The earth thawed. The wind lost its bite. And what had once been a harsh stretch of highway shoulder became simply another place the season passed through. By then, the pups were no longer tiny shapes curled against their mother's ribs. They had grown, sturdy legs, bright eyes, bounding energy that filled the makeshift pen Daniel built behind his garage. One by one, families came to meet them. A pair of school teachers from Spokane, a ranch couple needing a working dog, a retired firefighter looking for a companion. Each adoption happened carefully, quietly. No big announcements, no emotional speeches. Just the simple act of handing over a life that had survived something it should never have endured. And when the last pup left, wagging its tail as it climbed into a new truck, Daniel stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, letting the emptiness settle. Not sad, not relieved. Something in between. Behind him, the dog mother watched from the porch. She wasn't thin anymore. Her ribs no longer showed. Her fur had smoothed out into a thick, dignified coat. She moved slower than a young shepherd, her joints stiff from those freezing weeks, but she carried herself with a steady, grounded calm. Her name was Grace now. Evelyn had suggested it first. Daniel didn't argue. Grace had become part of his routines long before the pups were adopted. At first she lingered near the pickup, unwilling to stray from the ghosts of what she'd protected. Then she began following Daniel part way to his truck, then halfway, then all the way. Always silent, always watchful. One morning in early March, she simply hopped into the back seat, as if she had done it 100 times. Daniel didn't ask her to get out. She didn't ask permission to stay. From then on, he never drove alone. Some days she sat upright, looking out the window at the passing pines. Other days she curled into the seat, resting, letting the motion of the truck lull her. She didn't demand attention. She didn't need reassurance. They shared the cab the way two people share a quiet understanding, wordless, steady, unforced. Out on the highway, familiar faces began to notice. "Hey, Carter, that your dog? Looks like she trusts you. She rides better than half my kids." Daniel would shrug, give a small smile, and keep walking. He didn't try to explain the story. Some things didn't need to be retold to strangers. At home, Grace found her spots, the warm patch of sun beside the kitchen door, the old blanket by the wood stove, the porch steps she liked to survey at dusk. In the evenings, Daniel sometimes caught her staring toward the far hills, the direction of the abandoned farm she'd once belonged to. Not longing, not fear, just acknowledgement of a life she had survived. She was older now, calmer. Something in her posture said she had given everything she could to her pups and had nothing left to prove to the world. Daniel felt the same shift in himself. He didn't talk about it, but the emptiness he'd carried since losing his wife no longer felt like an open wound. More like a scar that had finally settled. The quiet in his house no longer echoed harshly. Grace's breathing filled the spaces that silence used to swallow whole. They became a pair, not because either of them needed rescuing, but because they understood what it meant to stay when leaving would have been easier. One cool spring morning, as Daniel prepared to leave for a maintenance job, he opened the truck door and glanced toward the porch. Grace didn't wait for an invitation. She trotted down the steps, hopped into the back seat, circled once, and settled in with a gentle sigh. Daniel shut the door behind her. Nothing needed to be said. Nothing needed to be asked. This was simply their life now. And as the truck rolled out of the driveway, sunlight catching the edges of Grace's coat, Daniel realized something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. The world didn't feel so empty anymore. It started quietly. Most things that truly matter do. A teacher at the local elementary school heard the story from one of the families who adopted a pup. Then a church volunteer repeated it during Sunday coffee hour. Then a retired mechanic mentioned it at the VFW hall, where veterans nursed coffee stronger than their patience for drama. A dog who stayed. A man who didn't walk away. 5 pups who lived because someone finally said enough. No one called it heroic. Not at first, just right. By late spring, people in the neighborhood began stopping Daniel at gas stations, grocery aisles, and job sites along the highway. "You're the guy who found that shepherd, right? Is she doing okay? Heard she saved her litter." "That true?" Daniel always answered with the same modest shrug. "She did the hard part. I just showed up." At the school, the story became part of a reading project about loyalty. Kids drew pictures of Grace under the old pickup truck, her body curled protectively around the pups. Crayon sketches of a brown and cream shepherd appeared taped along the hallways with captions written in shaky handwriting. She never left. She was brave. She protected her babies. One child, a quiet boy who'd recently lost his mother, wrote something that made the principal pause before pinning it to the wall. Sometimes the strongest ones don't look strong. Sometimes they just stay. At the small Methodist church Daniel rarely attended, Pastor Erickson mentioned Grace during a sermon about perseverance. The congregation nodded, some wiping at the corners of their eyes. No scripture quoted her, but the message settled deep. Even when abandoned, she didn't abandon. There's something holy in that. For the veterans group Daniel occasionally helped with highway repairs, Grace became a symbol of a different kind of endurance. Staying, holding ground, refusing to give up even when the world walked away. In conversations between men who rarely spoke about their feelings, her name slipped in naturally. That dog, she had every reason to run. But she didn't. Makes you think, doesn't it? Yeah. About who we used to be. About who we still could be. When the Spokane Rescue Network asked for volunteers, Daniel found himself saying yes before his mind caught up. He started small, transporting food, helping repair kennels, checking on abandoned litters found along rural roads. Grace went with him everywhere. The first time she stepped into the rescue center, the other dogs fell silent. Not frightened, just attentive, like they sensed an animal who understood loss and survival more than any training manual ever could. People began referring to her with a quiet, affectionate reverence. "That's Grace, right? The one they found under the pickup? The mother who never left?" Daniel always felt a strange warmth in his chest hearing it. Not pride, exactly. More like he was walking beside a story larger than either of them. At a community event that summer, someone handed Daniel a small wooden plaque. The inscription was simple. "She stayed in honor of Grace and the lives she saved." He hadn't expected it, didn't know what to say. He just placed a steady hand on Grace's back while she stood calmly beside him, tail relaxed, ears slightly forward. She seemed to understand the attention wasn't about fame or praise, it was about truth. Sometimes the world needs to be reminded that staying, simply staying, is an act of courage. Grace's story spread beyond Spokane. Rescue groups shared it online. Churches mentioned her in newsletters. A local reporter wrote an article titled, "The Mother Who Refused to Run." But at home, nothing changed. Grace still rested on the kitchen floor near Daniel's boots, still rode in the truck like a quiet guardian, still watched the doorway as if expecting someone who never came. And everywhere they went, people recognized her. They didn't call her the abandoned dog. They didn't call her the stray. They called her the one who stayed. And Daniel, who had once convinced himself he'd lost too much to make room for anything more, began to understand the weight of that legacy. Because in a world quick to leave, quick to forget, quick to move on, Grace had chosen differently. And now an entire community was learning from her. The world had warmed into late summer by the time the quiet afternoon settled over Daniel Carter's property. The kind of afternoon where nothing hurried, nothing demanded, nothing shouted. Just breath. Just light. Just stillness. Grace was stretched out on the wooden porch, her chin resting on her crossed paws. The sun traced a golden line along her back, warming the streaks of cream in her fur. Her eyes were half closed, not sleeping, simply watching the yard with a calmness she'd earned the hard way. Every so often, her ears flicked toward the road, toward the rustle of trees, toward the memory of a world that once abandoned her, but no longer held any power here. Daniel was at the fence line, tightening the last section of wire. He worked without rush, the steady rhythm of someone who wasn't fixing a problem, but tending something that mattered. The tools clinked softly. Boards settled with small sighs. A life that had once felt empty now had weight again. Quiet, gentle weight. Grace lifted her head when Daniel stepped back from the fence. He wiped his brow with the edge of his shirt and gave her a nod, the kind that said everything without saying anything. She thumped her tail against the porch. Just once. Just enough. Daniel walked back toward the house, boots crunching in the dry grass. He paused at the steps, looking down at the dog who had changed the shape of his days without ever asking for anything in return. "You know," he murmured, lowering himself onto the top step. "Some people say dogs don't understand abandonment." Grace looked up at him, blinking slowly, the afternoon sunlight reflected in her steady gaze. Daniel exhaled, a softer breath than he used to know how to make. "But maybe," he continued, resting a hand lightly on her head. "They understand loyalty better than we do." Grace leaned into the touch. No dramatics, no grand gesture, just presence. The same presence that had kept her under that truck. The same presence that had brought Daniel back to life in ways he hadn't expected. The sky above them shifted into a deeper shade of blue. A breeze moved across the yard, carrying the scent of pine and warm earth, the kind of breeze that made a place feel lived in. Grace settled once more. Daniel stayed beside her. Nothing loud, nothing heroic, just the quiet ending of a story about two beings who decided not to leave, and for many who would one day hear it, that was enough. Many people who watch stories like this say it reminds them of someone they once loved. Maybe a person, maybe a dog, maybe a moment when staying changed everything.